we cheapen women, we cheapen experiences, and the video games where they cheapen live and whatnot.
It's the Channel Mom Show with Jenny Dean Schmidt. We're here for you.
Every kid is unique, and every mom wants to capture that uniqueness on film. Bring your family's memories to life, supersized and gorgeous. Just click Turpentine Portrait Gallery's ad to the right of this video to get your summertime promotion for kids and families.
We've got John Michael Keyes. It's a strange introduction, but most well known for the fact that he lost his precious daughter at the Platte Canyon High School shooting in 2006. But he and his wife have made it their mission to help other schools and to incorporate a number of the things that they're looking at for school safety through their I Love You Guys Foundation. And one of them is the standard response protocol. And you're telling me, John Michael, it's in how many Colorado schools now?
It's in over 1,000 schools in Colorado and over 5,000 across the country.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Another man who has been instrumental in talking about these things, in bringing reassurance to people, in figuring out ways to be safer in school districts is Sheriff Fred Wagner, who also happens to be a friend of mine. Sheriff Fred was there on the day that Emily passed away. He was instrumental in the response. He had to go through it. He shed tears along with the rest of us. Fred, we're so glad to have you on the show. Welcome to the Channel Mom Show, Sheriff.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us. I was doing some research and I saw that we've had school shootings since the 18th, 17th century. So it's not that they're brand new. It's that there was an uptick in them in about the 1980s, at the end of the 1980s. And the massacre kinds of shootings didn't really seem to unfold until about the 2000s. And then we've consistently had, 30 to 70 school shootings. There have been 65 school shootings since the year 2000. And so the school shooting aspect has always been there. There's always been somebody who's been upset or mad or a loner or had some issues and went to shoot somebody else at school. But the massacres are relatively new. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. That was a nice little succinct answer, Fred. After Platte Canyon High School, I want to get right to this. You went to Washington, and you've been all over the country now speaking about this. You had an interesting conversation with a president, and I want you to tell us about that.
Well, I went back for the School Safety Summit back in Washington, D.C. A couple months after the Platte Canyon incident. And the President Bush asked if there was any way to stop, the violence. And I said, all you have to do is change the culture. It seems like back when I was growing up, and folks that grew up in the 60s, the 70s, we just never thought. I mean, when we got into a fight, it was you went out and you busted your knuckles, and then the fight was over.
Yeah.
Nobody ever thought about actually using a gun or using a knife. These were tools that we used for hunting and fishing, and then it seems like our society changed, and that all of a sudden we were going to stab somebody, we're going to shoot somebody, and I just was always fascinated by how that changed. It's just sad that we've progressed to that, and I think a lot of that does have to do with I think the movies becoming more violent, video games, certain types of music. I think all of that influences and then, in a sense, esthetized children into believing that killing was nothing. It was no big deal. Yeah,
that they're anesthetized. And some people will argue against it. I was just reading research this morning. If you can find a threat assessment and you can find some precursors and what kinds of things that the potential shooters will show that they're loners or that they've been cut out or they're ostracized in some way or that they've got a certain family environment. But some research shows, and Lieutenant Dave Grossman is one of those who says this. He's written a book, Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill. But this research, Fred, and I believe, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that they discovered that Adam Lanza, the boy man, he was sort of in between, who shot and killed 26 people at Sandy Hook, was actually very involved in violent video games before the fact. Is Call of Duty, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. I mean, some people are going to argue with us on that. And it's not Hollywood's fault and it's not culture's fault, but you feel pretty strongly about this and tell people about why you think there is a link.
Well, we cheapen everything. I've listened to some, and John Michael is big on music, as far as and in that his a big part of his life. But, it seems like we have gone to some types of music that we cheapen women, we cheapen the experiences, and the video games where they cheapen live and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I think that does have and reflects upon the youth, and so they think that it's not a big deal to go out and shoot a couple of people, and then you go back to do whatever your friends are doing. So go back to texting.
Right.
It just seems like that is just something that we need to work on. We need to have value. Value in life, value in those experiences, and I just think somewhere along the line that's been just pushed aside.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and it's why I do the show, because I worry about moms and families and their homes, and I'm not here to preach and say I'm better than you, I got it right, you need to get it right like me. That's not my point. My point is to say your children will listen to you, so teach them well, and don't let a video game bring them up and teach them what's right and wrong. And you're right. It is gratuitous violence. They get anesthetized to violence. It's nothing to them on a screen. And they have been continually linked, some of these folks, I think even at Columbine, to playing violent video games. And I'm right there with you, in violent movies and violent music. And we sound like old folks, I guess, but I think the research backs us up. So Fred, tell me, when you're traveling around the nation, you most recently spoke with John Michael out east, and tell us what you're telling people and what you're trying to do to help schools get to a new place with safety.
Well, I think that's basically, one of the big things is what worked, what really worked for us. The mindset, even pre-Columbine was you got to the scene, you secured the perimeter, and you called in SWAT. And then, since that time, we've moved into the active shooter. We've seen that advancements there, that we've gone to the 1, 2, and 3 officers. Now we're coming back down the other way now, back down to the first officer in. But I've been going around the country just telling folks about the lessons learned. We actually a month before we've been training on active shooter in the school.
Yeah. And
it really, I think, prepared us. We knew the school inside and out. And the relationships. I think, if anything, it's the relationships now that you have with law enforcement, the schools, the ambulance, the fire department, all those outside agencies. Getting them all together and being on the same playbook when you're going to respond really helps out. And I think probably more than anything, and John Michael put together this presentation that was just incredible. The first time that I know of that the law enforcement and the victim's father spoke together and putting on a presentation. I don't think that's ever been done before.
Yeah.
And it was just very, very powerful. I was very blessed to be part of that with John Michael.
Yeah. Was that meaningful to you to stand up there with Fred?
Oh, it was an amazing experience. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Fred felt for your daughter and still does. And Sheriff, I'm proud. I know you're on my show, and I'm not just trying to pander to you, but I'm proud to call you my sheriff, because you did practice for that very thing in the weeks before, and so you did know what you're doing. And I'll tell you something else, Sheriff. After Sandy Hook, it almost makes me cry. I was so glad when I drove up to my daughter's school in Park County, and you already had officers standing outside of her school at carpool. You believe in those school resource officers, yes, as a form of prevention.
Oh yes, very, very much so.
And my daughter's school is still staffed. Is that something you made a priority in your police department?
In the sheriff's office, we did, yes. And one of the things that I think we've seen is that there's not only do the kids feel safe, but I think the staff feels safe by having that trained law enforcement officer there. I'm a big one for SROs in the school. I don't believe that you could just overnight teach somebody how to act in a certain situation.
Yeah.
And so I think it takes a lot of training, and so I'm a big advocate of the school resource officers in there.
Yeah, it could be nice if we had that nationally. Shelley, did you have a question?
Yes.
So my question is, can you touch more on building that relationship? Because I felt like in Bailey, we were at the same barbecues. And so there was already a relationship there with the staff and law enforcement and fire that we had, and I think that was unique in our town as opposed to what's going on across the nation. So how can they build that relationship?
Yeah, in bigger cities, because Sheriff, she's right. In Bailey, we all knew each other, and that was an advantage for us. But how can other departments build camaraderie and knowledge between schools and officers?
Well, Shelley, I think you guys are right on. I mean, as far as we know, we're small, so we know everybody. I went to high school with Heather, and we've known everybody a long, long time. But I think if you sit down, you got to have that sit down with those individuals from law enforcement, from the fire department, from the ambulance, from the school, and at least wise have that face-to-face dialogue. In a lot of school districts, that in itself is the big deal, because a lot of have never seen who's in charge, because there's so many schools maybe within that district.
Yeah.
They don't know who that officer is. Big departments, And so I think if you sit down and be able to kind of say, okay, well, I know Dave now. I know who Steve is, I think that's a biggie. When I was in Louisiana, first of all, they had one school district I was there, they never had seen the same officer.
Oh.
Because they have so many police officers in that area, they don't know who's going to come there. And so one of the things was to be able to sit down with everybody and say, okay, well, now this is what the officer is, and if he's not on, this is the officer that's coming. And so we kind of get an idea of who's going to be there. This is the principal for this school. They've never met. This is the folks for the ambulance. This is the folks for the fire. SWAT teams. Knowing we're going to get a SWAT team from this area or this area.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we may not do those things in this area that you do over there.
So I'm hearing you say there needs to be consistency in relationship. Is that right, Fred?
Oh, big time.
Yeah. What would you say to our moms listening today about how they can feel like their schools are more secure? I
think the big deal is just have those conversations with your principals, your teachers. The standard response protocol that John Michael's talking about going through throughout the country. I think getting that into the schools and making sure that those emergency plans are not just sitting on the shelves collecting dust, that they're a living document and they have to be looked at every year. Yeah. Well, God bless you. Thank you for all you are doing for the rest of the nation, having gone through the tragedy that you've had to go through. And thanks so much for being on the show today, Fred. Thank you all. All right. Take care, Sheriff. Bye-bye. God bless. I am so appreciative of Sheriff Fred. He is unique, and he is sort of the old school cowboy sheriff. And you gotta love his approach, because he's serious. Yes, John Michael? He absolutely is. I think he helped set the tone in the aftermath of losing Emily. Yeah. With his frankness, his honesty, and his compassion.